Over me? Twice? Oh, get out of here. Maybe once, but not twice over the easel. Twice, 2 times in a row. He got 2, I got 1, Kobe got 1. Something wrong with that picture.
You've won MVP awards with that.
Yeah, one time and lost to Steve Nash twice. That's how I know it's not going to be good. Thank you very much.
Come on, man.
Can you show me one of those MVP trophies that you stole from me? Was he true MVP or was he a sympathy MVP?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Informathletics. Today we're going to be reviewing the 2005 MVP to see if Shaquille O'Neal was correct when he said that it was a sympathy MVP and that he really should have won it. This was Shaquille O'Neal's first year in Miami playing with Dwayne Wade, and this would end up being Steve Nash's first MVP that he won, finishing first place over Shaquille O'Neal in the voting. And the crazy thing about this video is I actually used some artificial intelligence to help me see if the media made a mistake. And it turns out that AI says that Shaquille O'Neal should have won the MVP over Steve Nash, and that the media went outside of the normal bounds of criteria to give Steve Nash the MVP. So let's take a deeper dive. Let's see how these players did. Steve Nash in the 2005 season averaged 15.5 points per game, 3.3 rebounds, 11.5 assists, 1.0 steals, 0.1 blocks, and 3.3 turnovers. He averaged a double-double. But what really sets him apart was his shooting. He shot over 50% from 2, 43% from 3, and 89% from the free throw line. And he put up all those numbers in just 34 minutes per game. Of course, let's not pretend that the team's success doesn't matter in the MVP race, because of course it does. And the Phoenix Suns were the best team in the league in 2005, going 62-20 with a 76% winning percentage, ranking first among all teams with an offensive rating of 114.5 and a defensive rating of 107.1. In other words, they were great on offense and not so good on defense, but they played with a faster pace than others in the league. Of course, this team success is one of the reasons why Shaq says that Steve Nash ended up winning the MVP over him, and he might not be wrong there.
Because they had a better record, but Steve Nash has never been the most dominant.
I just want that.
And speaking of Shaq, let's get over to his stats to see how he did in the 2005 season. With the Miami Heat, he averaged nearly 23 points per game with 10.4 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 0.5 steals, 2.3 blocks, and 2.8 turnovers. Of course, he also averaged a double-double with points and total rebounds. His shooting was great from 2 because he shoots really close to the rim. He shot 60%. He never took any threes that year. And from the free throw line, well, we all know Shaq. He only shot 46% from the free throw line that year. His rebounds were split 3.5 on the offensive end and 6.9 on the defensive end. And he played close to the same amount of minutes as Steve Nash at 34.1. But what about his team? Well, they went 59-23 with a 72% winning percentage, ranking second in all of the NBA, with an offensive rating of 101.5 and a defensive rating of 95.0. So clearly not nearly as good at scoring as the Phoenix Suns, but their defense seemed to be pretty good with a 95 defensive rating.
The 2 times Steve Nash beat me out, you voted for Steve Nash?
I did.
So those are the numbers that the media use to determine the MVP. And what I like to do is to retrospectively go back and look at the playoffs, because to me the playoffs are a little bit of a validation to see if they picked the correct MVP. So first, let's start with Steve Nash. What did he do in the playoffs? Well, he started scoring a lot more, that's for sure. He scored 23.9 points, would grab 4.8 rebounds, and dish out 11.3 assists with 0.9 steals and 0.2 blocks. Of course, his turnovers went up quite a bit at 4.7, but his shooting remained amazing. He shot 55% from 2, 39% from 3, and 92% from the free throw line. Of course, as always, his minutes per game increased in the playoffs as opposed to the regular season, averaging 40.7 minutes in the playoffs. And what about Shaquille O'Neal? Well, in the playoffs, he averaged 19.4 points per game, would grab 7.8 total rebounds per game, dish out 1.9 assists per game with 0.4 steals and 1.5 blocks. His minutes per game actually decreased in the playoffs. He only played 33.2, and his shooting was more or less the same, 56% from 2, 47% from the free throw line. So why would artificial intelligence think that Shaquille O'Neal deserved the MVP over Steve Nash in 2005? Well, it seems to agree with Shaquille O'Neal that during the regular season, he was a more dominant player. The artificial intelligence definitely recognizes that team success is important, but the thing here is that both teams were extremely successful this year. They were only separated by 3 games, and that separation just isn't enough to justify giving it to Steve Nash over Shaquille O'Neal. Now, that's what the artificial intelligence intelligence says, but what do I think? Before I say what I think between Steve Nash and Shaquille O'Neal, there's one other player that should have been considered more closely for the MVP in 2005, and that player is Dirk Nowitzki. In the regular season, he averaged more points per game than Shaq. He grabbed close to the same amount of rebounds per game, 10.1. He had 3.3 assists, 1.4 steals, 1.6 blocks, and only 2.5 turnovers. And his shooting was pretty good too. He shot 41% from 2, 33% from 3, and 83% from the free throw line. While he did end up finishing third in voting, I almost have to give this one to Dirk Nowitzki. He kind of solves the problem that Steve Nash and Shaquille O'Neal have. Shaquille O'Neal was great on the inside, but wasn't good at shooting. Steve Nash was more of a distributor and really didn't put up some great scoring. But Dirk Nowitzki solves that. With his nearly 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 3.3 assists, he was well-rounded and a good shooter. And while he did end up winning the MVP later on, this year, you could argue that he should have won it and had a second MVP in his career. So what do you think? Is Shaquille O'Neal right? Is the MVP award that Steve Nash won in 2005 a sympathy MVP?
Was he true MVP or was he a sympathy MVP?
You let me know in the comments below. But Shaq does have one thing going for him. The artificial intelligence agrees with him.
Steve know he stole it from me. We talked about it in Phoenix. Steve. But it's not his fault.
They say anything negative, cause I just wanna hear it out your mouth, yeah. Give me fuel, it's a tool that I use to go ahead and run my mouth, yeah. I take shots, I take loss, I make shots, I miss lots. That's how you get big box, you get yachts, you swing lots and pop off a big shot. I ain't done chasing, got big dreams, bigger things, impatient. Who's at the top think they need replacement? Who's at the top think I'm gonna